U.S. Special Envoy Tim King is in Aden to meet the government, a visit of its first type to Yemen. The United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg concludes visit to Tehran. Houthi offensive on Ma'rib and intense fighting caused new waves of displacement within the city. Good evening and welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. For the first time since his appointment in February 2021, the United States Special Envoy to Yemen, Tim King, lands in Aden from Muscat. According to different sources, King is set to discuss peace efforts with the Yemeni government and different political factions in the Yemeni scene. In Oman, the U.S. envoy King visited Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi. The U.S. envoy visited Muscat to continue regional efforts to end the conflict in Yemen and discuss the latest developments in the Yemeni scene. In conjunction with the return of the U.S. Special Envoy to Yemen, Tim King, to the Middle East, the U.S. State Department confirmed that Houthi militia is the primary cause of Yemeni suffering, and any sympathy with them is unjustified. A U.S. State Department statement said that the Special Envoy and his team are focusing their efforts on stopping the Houthis' offensive on Ma'rib and the repeated attacks against civilian areas, which are exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Special Envoy King will also continue to stress the U.S. government's commitment to working with the international community to press the parties to implement critical economic reforms, to secure regular imports and distribution of fuel, and to resume commercial flights to Sana'a Airport. In addition, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said in a press conference that Houthi militia is the #1 cause of the suffering experienced by the Yemeni people. Price added the United States' position is clear regarding the conflict in Yemen, stressing Houthi militia's responsibility for the instability.
What I can say is that the notion that the Houthis have been anything but a destabilizing force and a force that has inflicted additional hardship on the people of Yemen, that is not an idea that we recognize. We have been very clear in condemning the Houthis' assault, including their ongoing assault on Ma'rib, other parts of Yemen as well. The Houthis, despite their claims to the contrary, have been a primary cause of the hardship that the people of Yemen face today.
Yesterday, the UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, concluded a visit to Iran, where he met up with senior Iranian officials and representatives of the international community in Tehran. During his meetings, the UN envoy expressed his concerns over the escalating military activity in Yemen, which is causing significant civilian casualties, including children, and is undermining peace efforts. Houthis have launched their offensive on the energy-rich Ma'rib since last year. They are mobilizing troops from different cities to control the city. More on this story is within the following report.
Houthis continue to control the city of Ma'rib, the last stronghold of the Yemeni government in the north of the country, besieging it almost from all sides at the expenses of lives of many civilians. Houthi rebels are determined to control Ma'rib completely, which would strengthen their negotiating position in any peace talks in the near or distant future. Houthis' determination in controlling Ma'rib is not surprising. They want to tighten the noose around this region because it has a storehouse for the majority of the country's oil resources. This will allow the rebels to exploit their position in the upcoming peace talks. The city of Ma'rib, which is located about 100 kilometers east of Sana'a, is the last stronghold of the internationally recognized Yemeni government. Since February, it has been the scene of fierce battles between the government forces and the Houthi militia. The coalition announces almost daily in the recent period a heavy death toll among the Houthis, who are being bombed and may reach a total of 1,000. As a result of the Houthis' advance, Ma'rib has become besieged from 3 sides, to the north, west, and south, and its isolation is only broken by the eastern road towards Hadramaut, which is monitored by 40 checkpoints. This road is the only outlet for government forces and the only way out for the population in case the Houthis take control of the city. This is a source of concern about the possibility of a humanitarian catastrophe. According to local sources, the Ma'rib camps have received about 2.2 million displaced people since the Houthis escalated their military operations in the region in February. On the ground, the Houthis seem unwilling to stop their military operations in Ma'rib, especially since they have controlled the capital Sana'a since 2014. They have seized a large part of the country's north. If they manage to control Ma'rib, this means that they have gotten rid of the last unified military stronghold on their way.
Today, Yemen's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Abdullah al-Saadi, delivered a message to the UN Security Council regarding the continued Houthi aggression and the barbaric targeting of civilian areas in Ma'rib and Taiz. El-Saadi said that Houthi militia brutally target civilian areas in Ma'rib, violating all international laws. He called on the international community, Security Council, and all human rights organizations to assume their responsibilities by condemning the inhumane Houthi aggression and the daily targeting of civilians in Ma'rib and other Yemeni regions, and calling for the Houthi militias to be held accountable for their crimes against humanity. The Minister of Planning and International Cooperation, Dr. Waid Badib, discussed Ma'rib's response plan with the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator of United Nations in Yemen, Diego Zorella. For his part, the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator of the United Nations in Yemen stressed the importance of continued efforts to enhance coordination and joint cooperation between the two sides to confront the humanitarian situation and provide aid for those in need. Houthi rebels' ongoing military campaign on Ma'rib has not only left thousands of casualties but caused a gross humanitarian crisis. On top of those comes the displacement. More details on the suffering of displaced people in Ma'rib are within this report.
Hundreds of families displaced from their homes sleep in the desert. Children, women and elders, everyone here faces the bitter cold night and the simmering heat of the sun during the day in a dry desert with no water or food. A new wave of displacement, this time from Al-Amud, around the camp, which was bombed by Houthi militia with missiles and mortar shells. These displaced people has nowhere to go but the desert. Bedding in the sand is the first thing that displaced people do here to start after the journey of searching for a safer shelter.
We took the children and women at night and got here. We were looking for shelter and slept in the desert without shelter and on the sand. In the morning, we went looking for tents, water and food. Suffering is still here. A week has passed and we're here and we're still suffering.
Options are limited for the displaced people, for they have no choice but to adapt. They try to use the possible firewood and timber to set up a tent for them to shelter in. At the time, the urgent humanitarian assistance of the concerned organizations disappeared. Local community, however, provided displaced with what international and local organizations could not. Number of displaced reached 15,000 in one camp, out of 65,000 people who were displaced during months of September and October.
هذا الموقع الذي الآن يستقبل أكثر من 15 إلى 18.
This site, which now hosts more than 15,000 internally displaced people tracking teams are still registering the displaced families and submit them to public humanitarian network. Displacement has reached more than 65,000 people and it is still going on. The first assistance that took place in these sites was the community assistance. People of Ma'rib were the first to help the displaced families to alleviate their suffering.
We have not received any assistance so far. There is so-called urgent intervention which occur when the displaced arrives at the camps, with whom we cooperate by providing tents and food.
Displacement numbers increase daily. Internally displaced suffering is exasperating further. This increased the need of humanitarian aids to cover amid an international indifference over Houthi systematic violations that caused displacement for civilians in Ma'rib.
Still in Ma'rib, Houthi militia shelled civilian areas with ballistic missile. According to sources, Houthis target civilian areas in Ma'rib with a ballistic missile, causing casualties among the citizens. Turning to Hodeidah, Houthi militia targeted with artillery citizens' farms in El Tuhaita district. Local sources said that the militia fired a number of heavy mortar shells, which landed near a solar-powered water well that feeds farms and residents with water. The sources added that this forced the farmers to leave their farms, fearing for their lives. To Taiz, Houthi rebels targeted El Waz'iyah with mortar shells. According to sources, Houthi artillery shelling over El Hanaya village injured a civilian. Still in Taiz, the joint forces announced that air defenses shot down a Houthi drone. According to media sources, a reconnaissance plane tried to fly over military sites in El Barah front, and it was dealt with and shot down. Coming next. Balabal Valley in Taiz is the cradle of the worldwide known Yemen coffee.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما أخرج لما ندير 12 كيلو ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما إحنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. Yemen has been known for producing the best coffee in the world, yet their agriculture suffers under floods and torrential rains. The following report looks into challenges farmers face in El Balabal Valley in Taiz while growing coffee.
Wadi Balabal is famous for its coffee cultivation and is considered one of the most famous medicines in Taiz, which is categorized by the diversity of its natural climate in addition to the abundance of natural spring water. This valley is also famous for the cultivation of many crops, most important of which are the valuable crops, that is the coffee trees, which is considered one of the best crops in Yemen. However, this year God granted Yemen with heavy rains, which led to a large flow of water among the coffee plantations' farms. And this water has become a serious threat to the coffee trees, as it may cause their death if it continues for a long time.
The large flow of water among the coffee plantations farm may lead to the extinction of the coffee trees if this water remains around it for more than 2 weeks, according to what is known among farmers. Therefore, we appeal to authorities and on top of them the Ministry of Agriculture to intervene by saving coffee trees and helping farmers to preserve the precious tree, which is one of the economic resources in Yemen. There should be irrigation networks to deliver water to remote areas where water doesn't reach. We also need to protect the coffee plantations from torrential rains by building concrete water barriers.
As a visitor of this region who seeks sightseeing, people have directed me to this spot, as it is a splendid, amazing tourist attraction. I thank God for that. But I was taken aback by the absence of local authorities. I see pollution, and I urge the local authorities to take this into consideration.
Coffee trees are exposed to a number of risks that cause a lack of production, including the scarcity of water used in agriculture, especially during the flowering season, as well as the high diesel prices. The spread of agricultural pests that cause a significant loss of the crop. The number of planted coffee trees has also declined due to the lack of new seedlings with good specifications. Also, the lack of qualifications and trainings for farmers, especially in the modern methods used in the cultivation and harvesting of the coffee crops, and the absence of infrastructure projects such as projects to transfer agricultural water from natural springs are all considered a major risk for coffee trees. Therefore, we appeal to government agencies and organizations operating in the Republic to urgently intervene and provide aid and assistance to farmers in order to preserve the existing coffee trees and to encourage the cultivation and improvement of the production of this important crop, which is considered one of the most important and precious economic resources to Yemen.
The World Bank classified four Yemeni governorates as being in the fourth stage of food insecurity. According to a new report published by the bank, El Dola, El Jawf, Hamran, and Raima were classified as being in the fourth stage of food insecurity. The report indicated that even with current humanitarian assistance, 12 of Yemen's cities suffer from large food consumption gaps, with 40% and more of the population suffering from inadequate food consumption. The United Nations has warned of an unprecedented collapse in the value of the Yemeni rial, which will further exacerbate the economic, living, and humanitarian conditions. The Office of the Representative of the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Yemen said in a tweet that Yemeni rial value has reached an unprecedented level, stressing that there is an urgent need to support the Yemeni economy to maintain the stability of the currency and to prevent further deterioration in the humanitarian situation. A number of shops closed their doors in Zanzibar for their third consecutive day in protest against the deterioration of the national currency and the unprecedented rise in prices. This comes in conjunction with the departure of dozens of people from the province of Lash today, Thursday, in an angry demonstration to denounce the collapse of the national currency, the rise in prices, and the deterioration of services. Sources reported that dozens of protesters demonstrated in the main street of Al-Anad, denouncing the great collapse of the currency against foreign currencies, the rise in prices, and the government's inability to find radical solutions. Yemenis seem to face two wars, a war that kills them and another which makes them die of hunger. They are starving because they cannot afford to buy food items due to the collapse of the rial and the inflation. The following report has more on this story.
Where the Yemen rial is heading to? The answer to the question lies within the conflict that escalated about 6 years ago, specifically with Houthis rebels controlling the capital Sana'a. Since then, the rial was not stable. It fluctuated into an upward surge against the US dollar, upping from 214 to a historic 1,000 against the greenback. Economists link the current fall of the rial to the political instability that engulfs the country, along with the failure to resume oil exports and to collect revenues from the state bodies. To help recover the rial, the Yemeni government replaced the central bank governors, shut down exchange firms to put an end to the currency speculation, and provided local traders with a dollar. Also, the government floated the rial to bridge the gap between the official rate and that in the black market, and relocated the central bank headquarters from Sana'a to Aden. This, however, was not enough, with the Houthis rebels banning the use of new banknotes printed by the Yemeni government in Aden and refusing to deposit revenues from Hodeidah seaport and taxes into the central bank in Aden. Now what's next? The Yemeni rial, according to experts, is doomed to plunge more, with pricing skyrocketing as inflation increases. People in Yemen will find it hard to pay for basic food and services, which could spark protests nationwide.
In Aden, the Minister of Health, Dr. Qasim Buhaybah, discussed with the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator of the United Nations, Diego Zorella, the urgent need to support the health sector. Minister Buhaybah reviewed the difficult humanitarian conditions in the country, especially in Shabwa, El Bayda, and areas south of Ma'rib, as a result of the hostilities there. For his part, the UN official expressed his concern about the current situation in Ma'rib, pointing to the possibility of increasing support and directing it to these areas. United States Agency for International Development announced $4.55 million in urgent COVID-19 assistance for Yemen. According to the Senior Development Advisor Jennifer Link, This assistance will provide much-needed life-saving oxygen for 25 COVID-19 isolation units and strengthen the country's COVID-19 response to minimize the risk of the virus. Link added that this additional support builds on nearly $183 million in U.S. aid COVID-19 assistance to Yemen since this pandemic first broke out. She stressed that U.S. is committed to partnering with Yemen to end the COVID-19 pandemic, mitigate its devastating social and economic impacts, and build back a world that is even better prepared for future outbreaks. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 21 new cases of the COVID-19 in 6 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 7 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 5 in Al-Mahra, 3 in Taiz, 3 in Ma'rib, 3 in Aden, and 1 in Al-Dala. Also 4 deaths were recorded, plus 17 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,831, including 1,901 deaths and 6,480 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The U.S. Special Envoy Tim Lenderking is in Aden to meet the government, a visit of its first type to Yemen. The United Nations Envoy Hans Grunberg concludes visit to Tehran. Houthi offensive in Ma'rib and intense fighting caused new waves of displacement within the city. This brings us to the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.